Let me see. Let's check the chat. Mike Farino coming here with the $5 super chat. I had always been against expanding the playoffs, but after last night, I'm all for it. It would either confirm SEC bias is valid or destroy it. I think SEC bias is valid. I just also want to see the playoff expanded. The reason I think that it is valid is because North Dakota State and James Madison always end up there like in the semifinals in the national championship game. No, everybody knows in FCS that North Dakota State is sunning people. They're the number 1 ranked team. They also end up with the number 1 seed. Nobody argues because it's a 2014 playoff. San Diego has been whooping behind in the Pioneer League for years. They win that conference. They get the automatic bid to the playoffs, and they get stomped out in the first, second round. I'm with that because that means you lost, right? That's what I'm here for. I want to know that every team that's undefeated got an opportunity to play for a national championship. I don't want to hand somebody a banner because they didn't play any good football teams. Because the Zach Wilsons of the world cannot make your schedule, right? I want that to happen. That's why I want the playoff expanded. I do think that the SEC teams are still going to make it into the Final Four. They're still going to play for national championships. But I want to see every team that is undefeated get the same opportunity to get skull dragged by Bama. Whether or not that's Coastal Carolina or Marshall or Cincy or BYU or SC. I want you to be able to play until somebody beats you. Because that's American, right? That's where I live. If you didn't beat me, I'm undefeated. I'm the national champ. Well, you didn't play nobody. I asked to play somebody. You won't let me. That's what expanding the playoff does. It puts to rest all the arguments about who's good and who's not. Because you got to settle it on a football field. Check the chat. See what else we got going on here. Trying to make sure I didn't miss any super chats. Shout out Cloud Woo, who is joining the community. I appreciate that. With the badge there. Let's see what else we got in here. If you are a member to the community, the badge shows up, and that makes it easier for me to spot your question in the chat. Let's see. So we got in here. Trying to make sure. My man from Russia, he's talking to Matthew. All right, cool. Doc Winston O'Boogie. What you got, Doc? He says BYU had 6 Power 5 teams on its original schedule before the Pac-12, B1G, and ACC canceled. I get that. I still want you to try to schedule another team inside the Pac-12 now that they have said we will take your out of conference scheduling if you submit to the protocols. And, they had that on the table with Washington. They chose not to play Washington. You got to take what you can get at this point if you want to be into the playoff. If you don't, you want to play a Holiday Bowl and claim a national championship, that's on you. My man from Russia. Yo, dog, you're going to have to put your name in there because I can't pronounce Cyrillic. I can't do it. So, hey, RJ, do you think Ohio State will make the championship finals or will they end up like last year? Okay, so the thing about Ohio State that is bothering me presently is they got a secondary like Oklahoma secondary in 2018. I did not expect that to be the case. When Ohio State announced that Kerry Combs was not only returning to coach the secondary at Ohio State, but to be the defensive coordinator, I was stoked because it felt like they were not going to have any drop-off after losing Jeff Hafley to a head coaching gig at Boston College. But that's exactly what has happened. Kerry Combs has been trying to run Jeff Hafley's scheme and Jeff Hafley's system. The problem with that is you can't really fix a car that you didn't help build. You got to take some time to learn how that car was put together so that you can take it apart and you can put it back together. Kerry Combs ain't got that kind of time, right? Just because you had 50 plus practices and played just 4 games does not mean that you've been able to accurately diagnose what's wrong with your team because you haven't played how other teams to see what those deficiencies are. Different teams play you differently than you're going to play yourself. You play your offense. That ain't the sort of offense you're going to face all the time. Those aren't the kind of players you're going to face all the time. You would think having Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, Master Teague, Trey Sermon, and the like on a field to go against would help you. But perhaps it's not that those guys are so good. It's that perhaps the secondary is just not that good. And when you look at Sevyn Banks, you look at Marcus Hooker, and you look at Shaun Wade, you want to believe that you could drop those dudes out there and you could play good football. But right now, they got to figure out whether or not they're a 5 DB team or a 4 DB team, whether or not they want to run cover 2 or they want to run cover 3. They want to be a cover 3 team, but they're getting cooked. Like Peyton Hernington was hurting Pete Werner, was hurting Baron Browning. You lining David Ellis up on a linebacker who's a wide receiver, you're going to get destroyed. You got to fix that. So if they get into the playoff and they got to outscore people and they can't stop anybody, kiss it goodbye. That's how Oklahoma lives, right? That's what's been wild is I'm seeing more Ohio State football looking like Oklahoma 2019, 2018, 2017. You can score 1 million points and you can put up 1 million yards. You can't stop anybody. And when you get to the playoff, you get exposed, dog, because every offense you place in the playoff is good. And supposedly, every defense you play is at least mediocre to good. Like LSU might have had the worst defense since Florida State to win a national championship. Whereas Clemson in 2018 rode its defense to a national championship. And that's how you would want to do it. Now, even Nick Saban would say you can't win national championships on defense alone anymore. But that is to say, I would much rather have an offense that can put up 35 to 40 with a defense that can stop you from scoring 28 than I would like to have an offense that can put up 50 and a defense that can't stop you from scoring 40, because now we're a 3 and out away from not only losing this game, but losing it big, right? We're a pick 6 away from this game becoming a 2-score, 3-score game when we can't stop anybody. Think about it this way. If Sean Wade does not pick off Michael Penix and return that to the house, it's a tie ball game going into overtime. That's how thin the margins are for Ohio State right now. You got to get wider than that against Indiana. I don't care that Indiana is a top 10 team. You're supposed to be the top 10 team like that by 3 touchdowns. Like that's what the spread was going into the game. Now we're actually having to have discussions about, is Latham Ransom the answer? Is Josh Proctor the answer at free safety? Can you run 3 linebackers out there? These are all questions I expected Ohio State to have answered before the season started. And now they're really having to come up with answers for those things as they face Illinois, as they face Penn State, as they face Michigan, who aren't good. So you're not going to get tested. And that might be the reason why you might ask questions of Justin Fields. Who has he played against, right? The argument now is that his first read is always open. He's good because his first read is always open. I don't believe that, but I see where the argument comes from because it's true, right? If your first read is always open, you ought to be a great quarterback. And you can see that from the completion percentage before the Indiana game. He plays a good defense, 3 interceptions, okay? He's having to pull off. He's having to take off. He's getting hit in the head, missed targeting calls. All these things need to be cleaned up, both on the offensive side and the defensive side. So that's what I am most concerned about for Ohio State going forward.